I've lived a long time, seen a lot of things, done a lot of things. Most of them I had no choice in. I was born in 1843, owned by my father until I was 18, then owned by my husband until he died. That's what they called it back then, though they used prettier words. Guardian, provider, head of household. But the truth was simpler, plainer. I was property, first my father's, then my husband's. I had no more say in my own life than the furniture in the parlor or the horse in the stable. That's just how it was. That's what it meant to be a woman. But there's one thing that stays with me even now at 91 years old. One thing I think about when I'm lying awake at night. One choice I didn't get to make. One moment when I realized fully, completely, devastatingly that I wasn't a person in the eyes of the law or society or even my own family. I was a thing, a possession, something to be transferred from one man to another like a deed to land or a bill of sale for livestock. And there was nothing I could do about it. Nothing anyone would let me do about it. I think about it every day, have for more than 70 years. 70 years of knowing that the entire course of my life was decided by men who never asked me what I wanted, never cared what I thought, never considered that I might have dreams or desires or plans of my own. They decided. I obeyed. That was the arrangement. That was the only arrangement a woman could have. People today, they don't understand. They can't understand. Women vote now, own property, get divorced, choose their own husbands, or choose not to marry at all, work for wages, keep their own money, make their own decisions. They think it's always been this way. Or they think the old days were just a little more restrictive, a little more traditional. They don't know what it really meant, what it really felt like to be property, to belong to someone else, to have no rights at all. I was born in Virginia, November 1843. Cold month. My mother said I came fast. She was working in the kitchen when the pain started, kept working until she couldn't anymore. Then she went upstairs, birthed me alone, cleaned up, wrapped me in a blanket, and came back downstairs to finish cooking dinner. That's what women did. You worked until you couldn't. Then you did what your body required. Then you got back to work. There was no time for anything else. No time for rest or recovery or being treated like someone who'd just done something difficult and dangerous. I was the fourth child, had two older brothers, Thomas and William, and an older sister, Catherine. Then after me came another sister, Elizabeth, and a younger brother, John. 6 of us total, 3 boys, 3 girls. The boys mattered more. Everyone knew it. Nobody pretended otherwise. The boys would inherit the farm. The boys would carry on the family name. The boys would amount to something. The girls would just marry and become someone else's responsibility. That's how Father saw it. That's how everyone saw it. Father owned a tobacco farm, 200 acres, did well for himself. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Had a proper house, 2 stories, 5 bedrooms, separate kitchen building out back, servants' quarters. We had help, 3 enslaved people who worked the fields in the house. I didn't understand what that meant when I was young. Didn't understand that we owned people the same way Father owned me, that we were all property, just different kinds, different values, different purposes, but all property nonetheless. We grew up knowing our places. The boys worked in the fields with Father, learned farming, learned business, learned how to manage land and workers and money. They were being prepared to own things, to run things, to be men of consequence. Catherine and Elizabeth and I worked in the house with Mother, learned cooking and sewing and cleaning and managing servants. We were being prepared to be wives, to serve men, to run households that would never belong to us, to raise children who would take their father's name, not ours. Father was strict, very strict, believed in discipline, believed children should obey without question. The boys got whipped when they disobeyed. We girls got whipped too, but less often. Father said girls needed to be gentle or no man would want them. Said a girl with spirit was a burden no husband would tolerate. Said our job was to be pleasant and obedient and quiet, to never argue, never question, never express an opinion that contradicted a man's opinion. That was how girls were raised to be valuable, raised to be marriageable, raised to be the kind of property a man would want to own. Mother enforced these rules as strictly as Father did. She'd been raised the same way, been property her whole life, first her father's, then Father's. She knew no other way, couldn't imagine another way. When I was young, maybe 6 or 7, I asked her why the boys got to do things we didn't, why they got to learn to read and write and cipher, while we only learned enough to manage a household. She looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was blue. Because they're boys, she said. They'll need those skills. You won't. You'll have a husband to do your thinking for you. She said it plainly, factually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I learned to read anyway, taught myself mostly. The boys had lessons with a tutor who came 3 times a week. I'd listen from outside the door, memorize the letters, practice them in the dirt with a stick when no one was watching. Eventually I could read the Bible, could read the few books we had in the house. Father caught me once, I was 12, reading in the parlor when I should have been helping Mother with dinner. He took the book from my hands, told me reading gave women ideas above their station, made them dissatisfied with their lot, made them difficult to manage. He didn't whip me, just looked at me with disappointment, said I'd better focus on being the kind of daughter a man would want for a wife, not the kind who thought she was as good as a man. That's when I first really understood, really felt it in my bones. I wasn't being raised to be a person. I was being raised to be a possession, a valuable possession if I was pretty and obedient and skilled at womanly tasks, a worthless possession if I wasn't. My entire value as a human being depended on how well I could serve a man. First Father, then whatever husband he chose for me. That was it. That was my entire purpose for existing. Catherine understood this earlier than I did. She was 4 years older. By the time she was 16, she'd fully accepted her role, embraced it even. She was beautiful. Everyone said so. Fair skin, dark hair, tiny waist, perfect posture. She never read books, never asked questions, never expressed opinions. She smiled and agreed and deferred to every man in every situation. Father was so proud of her, said she'd make some man an excellent wife, said she'd been raised properly, said I should be more like her. I tried to be like her, tried to be quiet and pleasant and obedient, tried to stop reading, stop thinking, stop questioning why things were the way they were, tried to accept that this was my lot and I should be grateful for it. Grateful that I was born into a family with means, that I'd be married to someone respectable, that I'd have a comfortable life as long as I obeyed and served and never asked for anything more than what I was given. I tried. I really tried. But something in me resisted. Some part of me that couldn't accept it. Couldn't stop thinking that it wasn't right, that I was a person, not a thing, that I had thoughts and feelings and desires that mattered, that should matter, that I should have some say in my own life, some choice, some small measure of control over my own existence. But I kept these thoughts to myself, learned to hide them, learned to present the face Father wanted to see while keeping my real self locked away where no one could see it, where no one could punish me for it. Catherine married when she was 18, a man from a neighboring plantation, Edward Harrison. He was 35, 17 years older than her, rich, widowed, had 3 children from his first wife who died in childbirth. Father arranged the marriage. Catherine had met Edward maybe 5 times before the wedding. Supervised visits in our parlor with Mother present. They'd made small talk about the weather and farming and nothing of substance. Catherine smiled and agreed with everything Edward said. He seemed satisfied. The arrangements were made. The date was set. I asked Catherine if she wanted to marry him, if she loved him. We were in our room the night before the wedding. She was sitting at the vanity while I brushed her hair. She looked at me in the mirror with surprise. "Want has nothing to do with it," she said. "Father has made a good match. Edward can provide well. His plantation is larger than Father's. I'll have a fine house and servants and everything I need. What more could I want?" "But do you love him?" I asked. She laughed. "Love is for novels, Sarah. Marriage is a practical arrangement. Edward needs a wife to manage his household and raise his children. I need a husband to support me. We'll suit each other well enough. That's what matters." The wedding was elaborate, expensive. Father spared no expense because it reflected well on him, showed his wealth and status, showed that he'd raised a daughter valuable enough to command a good match. Catherine wore white silk, looked like a china doll, perfect and beautiful and empty. She said her vows in a clear voice, promised to love, honor, and obey Edward Harrison for the rest of her life. Promised to submit to him in all things, became his property right there in front of everyone. The transfer was complete. Father gave her away, and Edward took possession. That's literally what the ceremony was, a transfer of ownership from one man to another. After the wedding, Catherine moved to Edward's plantation. I saw her maybe 3 times a year after that. She had a baby within the first year, then another, 4 children in 5 years. Her face got thinner, harder. The light went out of her eyes. When I asked how she was, she'd say fine, everything's fine. But I could see it wasn't, could see the exhaustion, the resignation, the complete absence of joy. She was living the life she'd been raised for, serving her husband, bearing his children, managing his household, being the perfect wife, and it was killing her slowly, draining everything from her until there was nothing left but duty and obligation and empty obedience. I didn't want that life, didn't want to be transferred from Father to some man I barely knew, didn't want to spend my life serving and obeying and having no say in anything, but I didn't have a choice. That's what I kept being told. That's what Mother said, what Father said, what everyone said. You don't have a choice. This is what women do. This is what God intended. This is the natural order. Be grateful you're being provided for. Be grateful some man is willing to take responsibility for you. Be grateful you don't have to think or decide or manage your own life. Just obey, just serve, just accept your place. I was 17 when Father started looking for a husband for me. Started having conversations with other men about their sons or brothers or business associates who might need a wife. I wasn't consulted, wasn't asked what I wanted. Father would have supper meetings with these men. They'd discuss land and politics and business, and somewhere in the conversation, almost casually, they'd discuss me, my qualities, my skills, my dowry, whether I'd be suitable for whoever they had in mind. I was evaluated like livestock, like a horse being considered for purchase. Good teeth, strong constitution, pleasant temperament, adequate skills in household management, virgin, of course. That was essential. No man wanted property that had been used by someone else. 3 different men were considered. Father would tell me about them after the meetings. This one has 500 acres. That one has a shipping business. This one is a lawyer with good prospects. He'd list their assets, their positions, their financial situations, never their character, never whether they were kind or cruel, never whether they drank or gambled or beat their wives. Those things didn't matter. A woman had no right to refuse a husband because he might be cruel. She had no right to refuse at all. Father would decide based on which man offered the best opportunity, the best financial arrangement, the best advancement for our family's position. I tried to express an opinion once. One of the men being considered was known to be a drunk. Everyone knew it. He'd been through 2 wives already. Both had died young under suspicious circumstances. Father was considering him because he owned a large plantation and had political connections. I gathered my courage and said, "Father, I've heard Mr. Peterson drinks heavily, that his wives died young. I don't think I'd be happy with him." Father's face went cold, hard. "Your happiness is not a consideration," he said. "Your duty is to marry who I choose and make the best of it. Mr. Peterson's habits are his business. Your business is to obey him. If his wives died, it was likely because they failed in their duties. You will not fail in yours." I was too terrified to argue, too trained in obedience to push back. Just nodded and said, "Yes, Father." But inside I was screaming. Inside I was terrified. The message was clear. My life didn't matter. My happiness didn't matter. My safety didn't matter. I was property, and property doesn't get to choose its owner. Property doesn't get to object. Property just accepts whatever happens to it and endures. In the end, Father chose someone else. Not Mr. Peterson, thank God. A man named James Whitfield. He was 28. I was 17. He owned a modest plantation about 30 miles from Father's land. He'd met me exactly twice, both times in our parlor with Mother present. Both times we'd barely spoken beyond polite pleasantries. But he'd seen enough to decide I was acceptable, and Father had seen enough to decide James was acceptable. The arrangement was made. I had no say in it. No one asked me if I wanted to marry James Whitfield. No one cared whether I wanted to or not. The engagement period was 3 months. I saw James maybe 10 times during those months, always supervised, always formal. We'd sit in the parlor and make stilted conversation while Mother sewed in the corner. James would tell me about his plantation, his expectations for a wife, the kind of household he wanted me to run. He never asked me anything about myself, never asked what I thought or wanted or hoped for. I was being interviewed for a position, the position of Mrs. James Whitfield, property of James Whitfield, and my job was to present myself as suitable for the role. Compliant, obedient, capable, nothing more. Mother prepared me for marriage, told me what to expect. "Your husband is your master now," she said. "You obey him in all things. You submit to him in all things. Your body belongs to him. Your time belongs to him. Your thoughts should be focused on pleasing him and serving him. If he's cruel, you endure it. If he's unfaithful, you ignore it. If he drinks or gambles or makes poor decisions, you say nothing. Your job is to manage his household, bear his children, and never cause him trouble or embarrassment. Do those things, and you'll have a tolerable life. Fail at those things, and you'll be miserable. It's that simple. I asked her if she loved Father, if she'd ever loved him. She looked at me for a long moment. Love grows from duty, she said. I respect your father. I'm grateful to him for providing for me and the children. I've done my duty and he's done his. That's enough. That's all you can expect. Don't go into marriage expecting romance or partnership or friendship. Expect duty. Expect obligation. Expect to work hard and submit gracefully and find whatever small satisfactions you can within those boundaries. That's what marriage is for women. That's all it's ever been. I wanted to ask her if she was happy, if this life had been enough for her, if she ever regretted not having choices, not having control over her own existence. But I didn't. I already knew the answer. I could see it in her face, in the tiredness around her eyes, in the resigned set of her shoulders. She wasn't happy, but happiness wasn't the point. Survival was the point. Endurance was the point. Doing your duty and not complaining was the point. That's what she'd learned. That's what she was teaching me. The wedding was set for June 1861. I was 18. James was 28. I barely knew him, didn't love him, wasn't sure I even liked him. But that didn't matter. Father had decided. The contracts had been signed. I was being transferred from one owner to another, and my feelings about it were completely irrelevant. I was property. Property doesn't get feelings. Property doesn't get choices. Property just accepts its fate and performs its function. That's what I'd been raised for. That's what I was about to become officially, legally, permanently. The night before my wedding, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed thinking about what was about to happen, about the life I was about to enter, about the fact that after tomorrow I would legally cease to be a person in my own right, would become an extension of James Whitfield, his possession, his property. Everything I owned would become his. Any money I might earn would be his. Any children I bore would be his. Even my body would be his to use as he saw fit. I would have no legal rights, no legal standing, no ability to own property or sign contracts or make decisions. I would be exactly what I'd always been, only now it would be official, legal, permanent. I thought about running, just leaving, walking out in the middle of the night and disappearing, going somewhere far away where no one knew me and starting over. But where would I go? What would I do? I had no money, no skills that would earn money, no way to support myself. A woman alone was either a wife or a whore. Those were the only options. I couldn't be a wife without being property. And I wouldn't be a whore, so there was nowhere to go, nothing to do, no escape, no choice, just acceptance, just resignation, just the slow death of hope that I'd felt growing for years. Elizabeth came into our room that night. She was 15. Still had a few years before Father would start looking for a husband for her. She sat on my bed, asked if I was frightened. I told her yes. She asked if I loved James. I told her no. She asked why I was marrying him then. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the innocence still there, the belief that the world might be different than it was, than it had always been. Because you don't have a choice, I told her. Neither do I. Neither does any woman. We belong to Father until we belong to a husband. That's just how it is. That's all it will ever be. She started crying, said it wasn't fair, said there should be a choice, said women were people too. I held her while she cried, let her grieve for the future she was starting to understand awaited her, the future that awaited all of us. But I couldn't comfort her, couldn't tell her it would be all right, couldn't lie and say marriage was beautiful, or love was real, or happiness was possible, because I didn't believe those things. Didn't believe anything except that we were trapped, all of us, every woman I knew, trapped in a system that saw us as property and treated us as such and offered no escape. I got married the next day, wore white silk like Catherine had, walked down the aisle on Father's arm. He handed me to James like passing a package. I said my vows in a steady voice, though my hands were shaking. Promised to love, honor, and obey. Promised to forsake all others. Promised to submit to my husband in all things for as long as we both lived. And then it was done. I was Mrs. James Whitfield, property of James Whitfield, no longer my father's responsibility, now my husband's burden. The transfer was complete. I moved to James's plantation the day after the wedding, left my family, left everything I'd known, moved into a house I'd never seen with a man I barely knew who now owned me completely. The house was nice enough, 2 stories, 6 rooms. Needed a woman's touch, James said. Needed me to make it a proper home. He showed me around, showed me the kitchen where I'd oversee the cooking, the parlor where I'd receive guests, the bedroom where I'd perform my wifely duties. That's what he called it, wifely duties, as if submitting to him was a privilege I should be grateful for. That first night, I learned what it really meant to be property, to have no say over your own body, to have to submit to whatever your husband wanted, regardless of how you felt about it. James was not gentle, was not patient, was not concerned with my fear or my pain or my reluctance. He had purchased me. I was his. He had every right to use me as he saw fit. That's what the law said. That's what the church said. That's what everyone said. A wife's body belonged to her husband. She had no right to refuse him, ever, for any reason. Refusing your husband was grounds for beating, for divorce, for being cast out with nothing. I endured it, lay there and endured it and felt something inside me die. Some last small hope that maybe marriage could be different, that maybe James would be kind, that maybe I'd have some small measure of dignity or autonomy or respect. But I didn't. I had nothing. I was nothing, just a body for him to use, a servant to manage his household, a vessel to bear his children. That was my entire purpose, my entire value, and I had no choice but to accept it. The days developed a routine. I woke before dawn, oversaw breakfast preparation, served James his meal, ate my own after he'd finished, spent the day managing the household, directing the servants, planning meals, cleaning, sewing, mending, preserving food, making soap, making candles, all the endless tasks that kept a household running. James worked in the fields, or met with other planters, or went to town, came back expecting dinner ready and the house clean and me pleasant and obedient, expecting me to never be tired or frustrated or sick, expecting me to perform perfectly at all times. I had no money of my own. James controlled all finances. If I needed something, I had to ask him for it, justify it, convince him it was necessary. Sometimes he'd agree. Sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes he'd say I was being wasteful or frivolous. Sometimes he'd buy what I asked for, but make me feel guilty about it, make me feel like a burden, like I should be more grateful, like I was lucky he was willing to provide for me at all. I had no way to buy anything myself, no way to have anything that was truly mine. Everything in the house was his. Everything I wore was his. Everything I touched belonged to him, including me. I got pregnant within the first 3 months, started feeling sick in the mornings, realized what it meant, told James. He was pleased, said it was good, said I was fulfilling my purpose, said a man needed sons to inherit his property, sons to carry on his name. I was terrified of childbirth, terrified of dying like so many women did, terrified of bringing a child into this world only to watch them become property too. If it was a girl, she'd live the life I lived. If it was a boy, he'd grow up to own some other woman the way James owned me. The pregnancy was difficult. I was sick constantly, exhausted, in pain, but the work didn't stop. I still had to manage the household, still had to serve James, still had to perform my duties. He had no patience for weakness, said women had been having babies since the beginning of time, said my mother had 6 children and managed just fine, said I was being dramatic, being lazy, using pregnancy as an excuse to shirk my responsibilities. I worked through the sickness, through the exhaustion, through the pain, because I had no choice. I gave birth in February 1862, a long labor, difficult, painful beyond anything I'd imagined. I thought I was going to die, wanted to die at certain points. The doctor came, male doctor, of course. Women weren't allowed to be doctors. I had to let him examine me, touch me, see me in the most vulnerable state possible. Had no choice, had no say. My body wasn't mine to protect or preserve. It belonged to James. He decided who could see it, who could touch it, not me. The baby was a boy. James was thrilled, named him after himself. James Jr. I held my son and felt a complicated mix of love and sorrow. Love for this tiny person I'd created, sorrow for the life he'd live, the things he'd be taught, the man he'd become. He'd grow up learning that women were property, that wives were possessions, that his future wife would have no more rights than I did. He'd become his father, and there was nothing I could do to prevent it. Nothing I could teach him that wouldn't be undone by James and by society and by the entire world around him. I had 5 more children over the next 12 years, 3 boys and 2 girls. Each pregnancy was difficult. Each birth was dangerous. I nearly died twice, but I survived, kept having babies because that was my function. That was my purpose. James wanted heirs, wanted sons, wanted to fill his house with children who would carry on his name and inherit his property. I was the means to that end. The vessel, the property that produced more property. That's all I was. That's all any of us were. The years passed. I aged, got harder. The softness I'd had at 18 was gone by the time I was 30, worn away by childbirth and work and the daily grinding reality of being owned, of having no autonomy, no choices, no control over any aspect of my life. I watched my daughters grow, watched them being raised the same way I'd been raised, watched James teaching them their place, teaching them to be obedient, to be quiet, to accept that they would be property just like their mother was property. I wanted to save them, wanted to tell them there was another way, but there wasn't, and telling them would only make it harder for them, would only make them rebellious and difficult to marry off, would only make their lives harder. James died in 1885. I was 42. He had a heart attack in the field, died quickly. I felt nothing when they told me. No grief, no relief, nothing. Just a kind of numbness. He'd owned me for 24 years, 24 years of my life belonging to someone else. And now he was gone. And I thought maybe I'd be free. Maybe I'd finally have some measure of control over my own existence. But I was wrong. James had left everything to our oldest son. James Jr., everything. The plantation, the house, all the money, all the property, including me in a way, because I had nothing, legally owned nothing, had no income, no means of support. I was dependent on my son's charity, on his willingness to let me stay in the house, to provide for me. I'd gone from being my father's property to my husband's property to being dependent on my son. I'd never been free, not for a single day of my life. I'm 91 years old now. I've outlived my husband by 46 years, outlived 3 of my children. I've seen the world change, seen women start to demand rights, start to fight for the vote, for property rights, for the right to control their own bodies and their own lives. Some people say these women are crazy, unwomanly, going against God's plan, going against nature. I say they're right. They're absolutely right, because I live the alternative. I lived being property, and it's not noble, it's not natural, it's not God's will, it's slavery. Maybe not the same as the slavery we practiced on others, but slavery nonetheless, legal ownership of human beings, legal control over their bodies and their lives and their choices. That's what it was. That's what I was. A slave to my father, and then to my husband, and then to my son. My entire life, I've been owned. People ask me sometimes if I had a good marriage, if I was happy, if James was a good man. I don't know how to answer those questions. James provided for me, gave me a house and food and clothing. Didn't beat me regularly, though he did sometimes when he thought I deserved it. Didn't drink heavily, didn't gamble away our money. By the standards of the time, he was considered a good husband, but he owned me, treated me like property, used my body whenever he wanted, regardless of how I felt about it. Never asked my opinion, never cared about my thoughts or my desires or my dreams, never saw me as a person, just as a possession. A useful possession, a valuable possession, but a possession nonetheless. Was that a good marriage? I don't know. It was the only marriage I could have, the only marriage any woman could have. We were all property. Some of us just had kinder owners than others. I survived it, lived through it, made it to 91 years old, outlived my owner, outlived most everyone from those days, and I'm one of the last ones who remembers what it was really like, what it really meant to be a woman back then, not the romantic version people want to believe now, not the gentle story about love and marriages and women's sacred duty, the truth, the hard truth, the cruel truth. We were property, we had no rights, no choices, no control over our own lives. We were transferred from father to husband like livestock, used and controlled and owned. That's what it was. That's what I was. And I'll carry that knowledge until the day I die. Carry the memory of being 18 years old and standing at an altar promising to obey a man I didn't know, promising to submit to him in all things, becoming his property right there in front of everyone. That girl is still inside me, still owned, still trapped, still without choices. And no amount of time can change that, can undo it, can give me back the autonomy I never had. I was property, and part of me will always be property. That's the legacy of being born a woman in 1843. That's what it meant. That's what it cost. And I'll take that knowledge with me to my grave.